So, yes, the people seem to be really interested in peer supervision, and we thought, okay, let's just talk a bit more. This is the dialogue series, and so a lot of this is about you talking to each other or you sharing in service of everyone. Um, so I thought today we might look at some of what's similar and different between peer supervision and paid supervision. We might look at, well, some people call it advantages and disadvantages, but then it sort of polarizes something into a disadvantage we might think is something undesirable, whereas it's really about the similarities and differences and what we make of those differences. We want to hear from you, and at 12 o'clock, so in 1 hour, the next half an hour, we're going to miraculously put you into breakout rooms where you might meet other people looking for a similar peer supervision arrangement to yourself, or in fact, none, if you've come on here and you think, I'm interested, but I don't want one. So, we changed the order of what we're going to do. So now I have very scrappy notes, but I'm going to try and follow them. So the first thing we thought, we'll do a poll of who's in the room, just so that you get a sense of who's here. Who are these 69 people that we're sharing this time with? And Nicola has made so let's see how many people can operate a poll, including myself. We're going to tick on like accreditation levels, um, where you think you are. But don't worry if you've got no accreditation and you've never been interested, just put yourself where you think you are. Are you fairly new? Tick foundation. Are you somewhere in the middle? Tick practitioner. Or do you consider yourself with maybe about 5 years or more experience, senior or master practitioner? So let's just have a look at who we are as 69 people in terms of our coaching experience. Um, so just dot the thing and click submit, and let's have a look. So this is who we are. We're slightly more, but half of the people roughly are practitioners. But 39% are senior practitioners. So between there, that's 83%, quite experienced people on this call. So that is worth noticing in terms of peer supervision. And 17% would count themselves as foundation level. So just a little kind of who's here. And so I'm going to pick up with that and just say, I have heard people sometimes say peer supervision might be a good place to start with supervision. And I would say anywhere is a good place to start with supervision. Anywhere, just start. But peer supervision is no easy feat. Like, this is not the easy option. You have no formal leader in peer supervision. You're responsible for everything that happens in terms of the practicalities. This might seem like a small thing, but it is not, because all that requires quite complex conversations at a really high skills level, I would say, to hang in with each other in really difficult places. And that is really good peer supervision for me. But we'll come back to that in a minute. We want to do another poll to see, and given that there's more than 80% of people are quite senior in this room, we want to know how many of you are already supervisors. So, again, self-identify. Would you say you are a supervisor? We're including trainees because my experience is as a trainee, sometimes we don't know whether to answer yes or no to this question. So we're nearly there. So just to have a sense of who's coming along to this group. So, well, there you go. Isn't that fascinating? That 55% are not supervisors, but that leaves 45% are either supervisors or not. So, pretty much half and half. So, just fascinating to see who's here. Um, and yes, Lucy's found another category that we didn't think about is have you trained as a peer supervisor? Well, yeah, just self-identify, which is just a very unscientific method of just seeing who's around, in our call today, and who's likely to be in your group. So we're going to what was I gonna talk about first? Um, in my new order of things. Actually, I thought I might talk about my peer supervision group and why I'm leading this really today is that I've been in supervision as long as I've been a psychotherapist, so that is about more than 30 years, and a coach for about 25. And so I always have individual supervision, but I might even have more than one individual supervision arrangement. It depends. Um, and I often have a group supervision thing going. And at the moment, it's group peer supervision. And for me, this is what it brings to me is different people who I actually don't know. Many of you might have seen that my peer supervision group, I put out a request on LinkedIn and said, "Does anyone want to join a group?" And the reason I did it is that somebody that wasn't known to me connected with me, and I always send a little message to say, "Oh, I see you've worked here," or, "Oh, I see this is what we have in similar," or, "I really want that," or, "I love this." And the person said, "Do you know anyone who would be interested in a peer supervision arrangement?" And I said, "Well, I don't, but I might be." And so we had literally about a 20-minute chat, and we thought, let's put it out on LinkedIn and see if anyone comes. The other person said, I've tried lots of times to set up peer supervision and I can't seem to find people. So our plan was to take the first couple of people that came that could join us, and that's what we did. And to me, it's we're early in the journey. We've only met 3 or 4 times, and it's just a complete joy, a different group of people. We've already had some very challenging conversations, hanging in with each other, um, definitely more than just having a cuppa. You know, we have a structure, we've talked about that, we've followed it. Um, yeah, just so far so good. And of course, we're all responsible for creating the success of that group or otherwise. We can't lean into someone to hold us. We're just leaning into each other. So we're going to pop you into breakout rooms now. And we're going to do a poll. So you'll be in a breakout room with somebody that's had a supervision arrangement or hasn't. And your question for the breakout room is to explore what factors have contributed to a successful relationship, peer relationship. Or you might come up with some factors that have hindered a successful supervision arrangement. But actually, you might also wonder what is success in peer supervision. So just see where your group goes. And obviously, you'll be in a small breakout room of up to 4 people with somebody that has been in a peer supervision arrangement or has not. And so those people who've never been in one, you just imagine what would make this based on your experience as a practitioner and based on perhaps paid supervision experience, what you would really want out of a peer supervision arrangement. Those who've had one, yeah, what did contribute to that success or otherwise? It's never long enough, is it? Somebody's always mid-sentence. in a group. But hopefully that was fruitful. So we're going to come to that question, what makes a peer supervision group successful? So hold your thoughts on that, because I'm coming to you for those answers. But I'm going to go backwards, picking up things in the chat. What is peer supervision? Let's just go to that for those people who've never been in that. So supervision with somebody that's a peer. In some ways it's obvious, but what does it really mean is much more intricate, I think, because it's not a conversation just like a cup of tea. It's a purposeful supervision. It's an aid to reflective practice, and therefore needs some kind of container to be developed to do this thing in. And what the thing is, the supervision, depends on everybody's idea of what is supervision, because as you know, people have different approaches to supervision and different ideas of what supervision is. And so that's one of the beginning challenges in peer supervision is what are your expectations of what supervision is? So you can have peer supervision in a one-to-one, or you could have it in a group where a group of people come together. On the other hand, you can have paid supervision one-to-one and paid in a group. And so some of the things that are different, I'm just going to go through some of the things I believe are different about these processes. So when we're looking at the value exchange, in paid supervision, we're handing over some money and we're buying something with that money. And so for all the supervisors in the room, what are people buying from you? If peer supervision can be really successful, which it can be, why do people want to pay for a supervisor? It's a really good reflection point. In peer supervision, there still is a value exchange because you're committing time and you're exchanging that commitment of this time commitment, which is also present in paid supervision, obviously. In peer supervision, everyone is doing the psychological work. That's evident. People are bringing their cases, they're exploring, they're sharing. In paid supervision, everyone is also doing the psychological work, but you won't necessarily see the work of the supervisor. They'll be taking it somewhere else. So it's your space as a supervisee to do your work, where you don't have to worry about their work. Whereas in peer supervision, everybody's work is evident. And this really, if you let that land, about how that might change the dynamic in the space and how that might present different challenges. In paid supervision, we often don't know a lot about the personality of the person. Of course, we gain all sorts of information. I hardly know anyone in the room. There's a handful of people, but everybody else will be gaining information about me, about the way I talk, about the setting I'm in, about my relationship with Nicola. Different things, you'll be piecing together things about me. And we do that in our paid supervision. But in peer supervision, that relationship is open in a different way. In paid supervision, mostly the practicalities are held by the supervisor. The contract, the process of agreeing the contract. But in peer supervision, everyone's involved in the practicalities, the contract and the process. And in peer supervision, no one might be a supervisor. You don't have to be a supervisor in peer supervision. That's it, you're peers in a way that you self-identify as peers. The level of experience, well, that's a really interesting question. Well, interesting for me anyway. Would we create a peer group or a peer one-to-one with somebody of similar experience? Very possibly. Something similar in that experience, but not necessarily. In paid supervision, would we want the person to be more experienced in our practice? So for me as a coach, do I want a supervisor who's more experienced in coaching? Not necessarily. What I'm buying is a supervisor who's experienced in supervision. I don't care if they can coach or not. I want them to know some of my context, but I want them to be a supervisor. That's what I'm purchasing. So that again might have really significant differences in the dynamics of those spaces. And actually, probably that's enough for now. There's a lot more, but let me just stop there. So Marcia asked in the chat, what is the, I think it was Marcia, what are the difficult conversations then in peer supervision? And I think some of these are becoming evident when we see those similarities and differences. How do we negotiate those practicalities? What if somebody doesn't attend? What does that mean? How do we know we're committed to this thing that we haven't paid for, and probably we don't really know anyone, and we don't know where it's going yet? How do we keep that commitment to each other? I'm going to pick up some of the questions in the chat in a minute. Nicola, if you could hang on to those questions, I'll come back. You can ask them to me in a minute. Yeah, let me stop talking and let you talk. So you've been in groups. Some of you have been in groups with other people who've experienced peer supervision, and some of you have been in a group where nobody's had any peer supervision. But what do you think are some of the factors that have made peer supervision, let's say, successful? Let's turn it over to you. If Nicola can, excuse me, unmute anyone and, just bring that forward. Let's hear factors for success. Let's start with Lucy. Kick us off, Lucy.
An amazing group. So thank you very much to Marianne and to Tolly and to Robin. And our little list was, firstly was structure, and secondly was protocols, thirdly was equal voice, and that connects to structure and protocols, obviously. Then next was practicing your coaching way of being. So people bringing their coaching self to peer supervision. Then there was something about that kind of group agreement around sort of safety and well-being and respect, all of that kind of stuff. And then lastly was something that we saw as being one of the things that's a bit more challenging in a group rather than a one-to-one, is the building of rapport and trust being a bit more extended or challenging when it might be a bigger group of people and where people are not necessarily the same people every time. So that
so size of group as well, partly in that structure that you talked about, Lucy.
Regularity and that impacting on trust building.
Yeah. So Lucy's talked to us about the container, about how we create the container. And so I think of that in terms of, let's just leave it as container and the relationships inside it. So when we've got the container, we can lean into it, the structure, the protocols, how we're going to do this. And then something about the way of being, and a few people have put in the chat, trust. And Lucy also talked to that. How do we develop trust? And for me, trust is not a static place. We don't get to, I've met Nicola today and I trust her. That is definitely not a thing. We can trust and we can not trust. It's a movable feast. It's like safety. I can feel safe and now I don't feel safe. So we're developing these in peer supervision. So who else might like to say something about factors for success? You could sort of wave or shout because otherwise I might not see you.
Yes. Finally,
Ah,
yeah,
Shan
did you say
or
John?
Jean.
Yeah. Finally, I realized this supervising we talk today is about the coaching capability and the coaching to supervising the other coach, right? Then I had the experience to join a learning group, and we have a group of coaching, and we do we learn together, and we also do a demo coaching. We invite a coachee, and one coach will conduct the coaching conversation. Then after that, the coachee will share the feedback, and then they will get offline. Then the other coach share the feedback to the coach. So I think maybe this is exactly the supervising we are talking today.
It's a way, Jean. As you'll see in the chat, people have said that in supervision, we can incorporate coaching, mentoring, supervision, even counseling, dare I say it, but counseling skills, a therapeutic way, is all within the form of supervision. Whereas if we stay in that developmental place, it sounds a little more like mental coaching to me, or coaching. So it's like finding out, though, what people want, what's in the contract between us, what do we want, and what kind of thing do we want. Somebody asked what's the goal of, Priyanka, I think it was, the goal of peer supervision. And for me, I would say it's the same as supervision, to aid my reflective practice. And it may be in a structured way that Jean is talking to. For me, that wouldn't be what I would choose, but that's okay, because those people who do want it can choose that form. I would choose something else. So I want to reflect on my practice and get people to engage with me. Lots of people have talked about listening and active listening. So let's come to Joanna.
Thank you. In our group, we all had the experience in peer-to-peer group supervision. And we realized that very often during the coaching academies, during the coaching schools, people have peer-to-peer supervision. And what might be different that wasn't said yet was the fact that we realized that there are two different kinds of supervision. Sometimes, very often in coaching academies, it is so-called normative supervision, where the supervisor is giving you feedback connected with your progress. How do you develop as coach or as a mentor if it's mentoring school? But completely different and with different aims is the problematic supervision, where one of the group, very often it is a person who is just among their peers, bring for example, problems with a difficult client as a coach or as a mentee. And this is completely different kind of supervision. And for example, when I am leading this kind of supervision, I use psychotherapeutic method called Balinta, which gives everybody opportunity to talk and to give feedback or give insights to the person who brought their case. So that were the insights from our group. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Joanna. So, Joanna, it's Balinta, as far as I understand. And in I have a book called Group Supervision. And in the book, Olga Ribina has written, I don't know if you know Olga, Joanna, about Balint groups for coaches, but she calls it the mirror group. But again, it's quite a structured environment, but a different structure to that Jean talked about, which Joanna is saying maybe a structure for an earlier stage, maybe not necessarily coach in training. It's a suitable structure for that. And so again, that's why in a peer group, you may want someone who's a similar developmental stage to you in terms of their coaching practice. But this question about what are my expectations here is really important early on. So let's keep going with things from you. What else is a factor that contributes to success of supervision, peer supervision?
I'm so sorry. I do have a question, so this
Uh-huh.
might not be the right time to
Okay,
ask it. It's okay?
why not?
Given that about half of us haven't had a supervisory experience, I posted that question in the chat, and one person was kind enough to answer. I'm still a little unsure about it. My question was, so a supervisor in a coaching setting, a supervisor for a coach, does not have to be a coach? And the
Okay.
person said yes. And then I would come to the point of experience and trust and expectations and all of that. And I'm curious about how I would bring my problem or my challenge to a supervisor who is not in the field that that I need help with.
Yeah, I think it could be a bit of a controversial thing. I think that some people would not agree with me, but actually, there are some incredibly experienced supervisors outside the coaching field. And I think with every supervisor, whether they're a coach or whether they're not a coach, it's going to be trial and error. We're going to join them and see, does this really work for me? So I definitely want somebody who has some idea of the context. I don't want to explain executive coaching to someone that's got no idea. I want them to have enough idea of the context I work, but they don't have to be a really skilled executive coach. But what they do have to be is skilled in helping me explore my issues. And so sometimes I think working outside I have been in the past a supervisor for a group of specialist midwives. Now, I definitely could not deliver a baby, but I can provide reflective practice for some of the challenges that they experience working with sex workers, refugees, people with substance misuse issues. So we can be a supervisor for those who are supervisors to people that we don't know their work intricately. And even in coaching, I have my setting that I work in as a coach. I work mostly in the corporate field, but not wholly. But if somebody comes that has a particular niche setting in coaching that I'm not aware of, or a particular model, solution focus, psychodynamic, something that I'm not wholly familiar with, I can still ask the questions. In your model, what is here that can support you now? I don't need to know what the model is. So in peer supervision, again, we're looking for that. Is the person that we're contracting with able to support our reflective practice? And that is a really challenging conversation, I find.
Just a quickie while I'm sorting out the questions. And I'm going to put a link in the chat here as well to the EMCC Supervision Competence Framework. I mean, Jo, you train coaches. You train supervisors. You have a supervision diploma.
Yes.
I mean, the competencies that I've just put into the chat here, which you can all download, that covers some of the things which supervisors are trained in. So when we're talking about who's supervising me, are they doing what's in that competence framework? And I mean, Jo, just while I set the next poll up, can you talk about a little bit about the kind of things that you cover, say, in your supervision diploma, to show the kind of breadth and the depth which people need to be able to bring to that conversation or into that relationship in a supervisor role?
So I think in informal training as a supervisor, you would get some input around peer supervision. But because formal training, whether it's with me or with anyone else, we're touching into topics, but we're not in the depth. We can't be because there's so much to supervision. So definitely I would cover peer supervision. But actually the experience, I'm trying to pick out which parts of your question, Nicola, because there seem to be lots of different parts.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You
I'm
could,
famous for that. I
in,
ramble.
in choosing a peer supervisor, so all the reputable courses will have some connection to the competence framework in EMCC. Those accredited by EMCC would have obviously a link to the competence framework. But when you're meeting another peer, they're not necessarily even going to have looked at the competence framework, but you could look at it together and go, well, what of this could we do? But the thing to remember that the competence framework doesn't, it's aspirational and it doesn't necessarily help you with how's this going between us. These are the difficult conversations, is how is this going? Am I supporting you in actual real terms? Are you getting what you want? This is the sort of challenge in peer supervision, because in paid supervision, your supervisor, it's part of what you're buying from them, is that attendance to your journey. You want your supervisor to be able to flex and move in the relationship. And in peer supervision, you're all doing it together. It's a really complex space. So if you're involved in peer supervision while you're still training as a coach, you have literally put yourself into one of the most complex environments in our system. And anyone who's working in a peer group or one-to-one, leave here thinking, wow, we're managing to do something that is incredible, because there is no formal leader. So let me just have a look at the questions, because in about 6 minutes, we want to go into groups. Oh my goodness, we're just like romping through this. And there's so much we could be doing. Somebody early on trained as a peer supervisor. And actually, I think there's some value in that. Peer supervision, if you've never had it, have it, because then you'll realize like how complex the supervision relationship is, about what you're paying a supervisor for, if you are paying. And do come on a course. I mean, I want to speak for myself, but I want to speak for the whole supervision training body, that we don't put on these programs lightly. We want people to look at supervision and enhance their practice. So let me just check the questions. Is there anything that I need to pick up, Nicola? Well, I can pick up. I just want to say about Lucy used action learning. That's another another model that can hold the work. So when people are talking about models for peer supervision, they're talking about the container holding you. And if that's not there through the model, you have to create, as the first speaker, who might have been Lucy as well, was talking about structure and protocols, deciding how you're going to hold each other. And you might make a decision in the first meeting and you might change that. Let me just have a look. Any questions, Nicola?
I was just reading the comment from Lucy, actually. Apart from group dynamics, we very much hope the coach I chose would have the competencies. Yeah, which leads me to think I'm happy that my supervisor is also a skilled coach. Really good reflection there. Thank you, love that, Lucy.
So some of the things, actually, we could we have a one-page handout that talks about some of the things about peer supervision. So clarifying expectations. Who do you want to work with? Someone similar to you or someone different? What are the kind of relationships? Often we enter peer relationships with somebody that we already have in our network. So what does this do? How does this impact that supervision right from the beginning? Where might we collude? How are we going to handle difficult conversations? And then a whole raft of contracting that, of course, will only come into play as you go along. Some of it's obvious, but some of it isn't. are we actually thinking the same thing to do with supervision? You heard from the people that spoke. There's many ways that people approach supervision. And are we on the same page? And really the difficult stuff is what happens when you bump up against each other? How are you going to handle that? Dare you hang in? So in the courses that I teach, we have a set of simple rules. Actually, I'll drop them in. I'll drop them in English. I have them in Chinese and Russian as well, if you want them. So these simple rules are not competencies, but they're ways of being. And one of them is dare to call it out. And that is essential in a peer supervision group. Dare to call it out, being able to pick up the dynamics between people in the group and speak to that. Or to what happens when you have an ethical dilemma. When you have a supervisor, you can lean into the supervisor and hope that they pick up the ethical dilemma. In a peer group, it's down to you. Dare you call out somebody else's practice? It's a chilling moment often. If you can do that with love and compassion, because that is one of our ways of being, is it always engage with love. And that tuning into yourself that's so important in everything that we do is, who am I in this and what's going on for me? I6 if you're a supervisor, but that tuning into you. And so let's just take the two practical questions that came up. Based on experience, if you were to suggest a maximum size of a group, well, I'm an advocate of small groups. So I would say 3 or 4, because all the dynamics are going to come out in 3 or 4. You don't need to be in 15 for dynamics to come out. And how would you put together what criteria? That's one of the questions, Esther. What criteria? But you have to ask that to yourself first. Who do I want? How often do I want to meet? What kind of model and structure do I want? Then go and negotiate with somebody else. My story, there was me, and then there was somebody else, and then we came together, and then we got 2 more people, and then we did it all together in this recent group. Do they tend to be people that you know or don't know? Yeah, in my case, I never met these other 3 people before. We were linked on LinkedIn, but we never even had a conversation. Well, one of us was. But often peer groups are people they know, and that provides a really challenging dynamic from the beginning in terms of making sure you don't collude. So let me pause, and I can see lots of people have to leave. And the next hour is really focused on people who want a peer supervision arrangement. Go and try it. And I would say make a commitment. Choose to make a commitment that means something. Like, what about a year? Why not meet 10 times in the year or 8 times in the year? Why not meet, at least a few times to give yourself the chance to go through some kind of forming relationship, to hit some bumps and overcome them and see what's this like for us, to really get the sense of what's similar and different inside you. So let me drop in just I didn't press send on that. Okay, they're the simple rules that we use in my course about all kinds of supervision. And this is my page on peer supervision just coming in, of things to think about as you set it up. So Nicola is going to do a poll.
Okay, here we go.
And hang on. I was just going to tell people. Oh, too late.
Okay.
If you're interested in, so the first one, I want to be really clear, is not group supervision. It is peer group supervision. Not just group supervision, peer group supervision. And the second group is in peer supervision 1-to-1, and one is something else. And so what we'll do is we'll put you in small groups of 4 for about 20 in total 24 minutes. Let's come back for the last 5 and meet each other and just start working through some of the things that have come up for you and share contact details. See, is there somebody I could really work with here?
Hello, Jo. So
Yes.
I'm reading your book.
Hey, Carlos, thank
Brilliant. The book,
you. Oh, that's so sweet.
amazing.
It's a really good book, I have to say. There's a chapter on peer supervision, isn't there? Written by
Interesting
Anna
because you mentioned,
Cleopas.
Can you show
because
the
I'm
book?
doing the level 7 mentor
Ah.
executive coaching,
Ah,
and your book is one of my references for my.
Okay, good.
really? Oh, could I just tell everybody that's here? It's Carlos has offered to. He's showing my book.
Yes, it's
I'm
a
a
pleasure. It's a
Uh,
great
if
pleasure to see you.
yeah, perfect, excellent.
Okay,
Oh,
Sim
you're
Jo's got it as
talking.
well.
both of your books.
Sim Chu,
Well,
we've known each other for a very long time, and I notice in the small group, Sim Chu and Rosalind and
Yeah.
Martau, we're all in the same group with somebody else from the same region, I believe. So anyway,
So, 1 second. Yeah, it's a good book. If someone interested, please, I recommend.
well, thank you very much, Carlos. We're on the last 2 minutes of this part. So we really hope that you might have found someone that might be interested. Oh, I saw a few nods then. But while you've been away, Nicola has, Matt will put the titles in, or if somebody else can put the titles into the chat. If Nicola's created like a Google Doc that if you're looking for one-to-one or if you're looking for group, you can go and put your name on. But to know it's in the spirit of peer supervision, it's not EMCC monitored. Just go and pop your name on and connect with some people that put their name on it. So Nicola, I can't even see Nicola. Oh, there you are. You're going to put it in the chat. And
Yeah.
Priyanka, Paulina, you've got some new members. Brilliant. Alex, how do you find a supervision group with a paid supervisor, which I would need for EMCC accred? Well, Alex, just go back and check that. We had a look. You don't need a paid supervisor, but you do need 4 one-to-one supervisions and more. A pool of EMCC coaches from which I could initiate a peer supervision group. So that's going to be on this page. Obviously, paid supervision, you can find EMCC have a supervision, I'm going to say department, but that's not what it's called. But somewhere on the website, you could connect with Paul Herdman on LinkedIn and he will point you to the right place. Let me put his name in.
I've got a list of accredited
no.
supervisors as well, which I'm going to put into. I'm going to put it onto that little document.
Yeah, hopefully I'm on the list as well. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll
Yes.
connect you to, obviously to myself, but to other people. If you are interested.
Sorry, can I just quickly
Yeah.
clarify? When you say 4 one-to-one supervision is 4 per year, yeah? For each sort of year. Okay.
Well, it's 4 one-to-ones, but you need to just check that, Ulrika, because I always thought it was 8 hours. So just go and check that. It might be 4 one-to-ones and something else. So check it on the website. We don't want to.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to add it onto that document as well. And I'll put the link on that document that we've got into the chat. Yeah, it's on the 5-day challenge page. So I'll find that and I'll put that onto the chat there.
But this is also after accreditation, just as an ongoing requirement.
That's
yes,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, for ongoing
Again, just
accreditation.
go and check it.
Yeah, check it.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you're in supervision, that is just great. Yeah,
Sure,
so just
exactly.
check it. If you want to know anything else, or if you want Nicola and I to do another session, we're absolutely up for that at some point. We'll definitely do one next year, but yes, I do lots of other sessions. So connect with me on LinkedIn because I might do a series somewhere that is not it's not applicable through EMCC, but I might run it through online events and do a little series on peer supervision so that we can dive a bit deeper into that rather than zoom along the surface. And the person who asked for my books, hang on a minute, let's do everyone. So the one that, so both of them are on Routledge. Actually, what is it called? So it's editors, authors, discount code 24. If you put this code in on Routledge, you can have a 30% saving on the price for both books. So one is called Coaching Supervision Groups. That's quite obvious. It's called Resourcing Practitioners. And the other one is really stretching the edges of coaching supervision. It's one of the EMCC Mastery series. And at the time, it was people that were thinking differently about supervision. And Peter and I put it together for EMCC last time. And it's just called Coaching Supervision, Advancing Practice, Changing Landscapes. But this is a bit more dispersed topics, but the first book on coaching supervision groups is the only one actually on coaching supervision groups, and there are some amazing chapters in there. Groups with nature, groups online, peer supervision, Olga Ribina's Balint groups that Joanna talked about Balint before. Yeah, so if you're interested in groups, that would be a fantastic resource, I think.
As we head towards networking, I just want to thank you, Jo. Just, you know, when you were here a couple of weeks ago and we were getting really excited about peer supervision, and your agility in putting this together and just your generosity of thought and holding this space for us is just so appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Nicola.
Thank you.